They have even called for a sanction, of course, towards the Museveni's son, who is the general leading the military in Uganda, and is the one leading the raid of Bobi Wine's home. As we speak, Bobi Wine's wife has been hospitalized, and the way she was giving her testimony, what transpired in the last night, I can tell you, it is so terrible that despite of Yoweri Museveni being declared a winner, and even something that Bobi Wine has done wrong is not there, they are even declaring to kill Bobi Wine. You've seen the tweets of General
and the General Museveni has successfully received the office of the Chief of Defense Forces of the EPDF.
He's very calm and quiet. He will listen and take notes from everybody. So he gives everybody a chance. So in meetings where we have finished meetings, I've said, really, I like the way, the grace you handle things, because some people say stupid things. If it was me, I would shut them up and but he's patient with everybody, and then he's able to listen to the different contending views and create a very good synthesis out of them.
Things are boiling up in Uganda as Yoweri Museveni's son has been forced to delete tweets threatening Bobi Wine, along with those mocking Larry Madoho, or else they face the wrath of the law. Earlier on, Museveni's son posted several tweets, and despite of him deleting, we are still having the tweets. The first tweet says, "Personally, I am embarrassed by our record. 22 killed in 1 week is too low. I promise to do better."
Uganda's political future appears increasingly unstable, characterized by intensified authoritarianism, a heavily flawed 2026 electoral process, and, as of early 2026, a reliance on coercion, violence, and opposition suppression. Incumbent President Yoweri Museveni, in power since 1986, continues to tighten control, sparking concerns of a potential crisis during the nation's transition. There is an uneasy calm in Uganda. The landlocked East African country is still unsettled after the longest-serving president, Yoweri Museveni, was re-elected in this year's polls.
I congratulate the people of Uganda. I ask the confused people to come back to sanity. Because what they are planning, what they wanted to do, we already know, and we have already mobilized together with the people.
The geopolitical landscape of Africa has entered a new phase marked by rising tensions between long-standing U.S. allies and a new generation of African leaders who openly question Western political influence. At the center of this shift is the growing visibility of Burkina Faso's transitional president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, whose statements and diplomatic posture have increasingly resonated across the continent. His rise coincides with mounting scrutiny from Western institutions over governance, security conduct, and human rights issues in several African states, including Uganda. This convergence of events has fueled intense public debate after reports emerged of U.S. Senate actions calling for accountability measures related to senior Ugandan military leadership. including figures closely connected to President Yoweri Museveni's family. Uganda has for decades been one of Washington's most reliable security partners in East Africa. The country plays a central role in regional counter-terrorism operations, particularly through its deployment of troops in Somalia under African Union and United Nations-backed missions. Uganda's military leadership, especially the Uganda People's Defense Force, has received extensive Western support, training, and funding. However, the increasing prominence of President Museveni's son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, within Uganda's military and political landscape has drawn growing attention from foreign policymakers. His public statements on social media, some of which have touched on regional conflicts and internal political matters, have raised concerns among diplomats regarding civil-military relations and political stability in Uganda. Within the United States, members of the Senate have increasingly used hearings, resolutions, and public statements to address governance and accountability issues involving foreign military leaders. While such actions do not constitute direct legal orders or arrests, they can carry significant diplomatic weight. Senate resolutions can trigger reviews of military cooperation, sanctions considerations, visa restrictions, or aid reassessments. In the case of Uganda, discussions within U.S. policy circles have centered on concerns related to democratic backsliding, treatment of political opposition, and the expanding political role of the military. These developments have not occurred in isolation. Across Africa, public sentiment has shifted noticeably, particularly among younger populations who are increasingly skeptical of Western involvement in domestic political affairs. This skepticism has been amplified by social media, where narratives of sovereignty, independence, and resistance to external pressure spread rapidly. In this environment, figures like Ibrahim Traoré have gained symbolic significance far beyond their national borders. Traoré emerged as a prominent voice following Burkina Faso's military-led transition amid worsening security conditions caused by insurgent violence. His rhetoric has emphasized national sovereignty, reduced dependence on former colonial powers, and the pursuit of alternative international partnerships. While his government faces substantial challenges including economic pressures and security threats, Traoré's messaging has struck a chord with audiences across West and Central Africa who view him as representative of a broader continental pushback against perceived Western dominance. When discussions involving the U.S. Senate and Uganda's military leadership began circulating in African media and online platforms, reactions from political commentators, civil society groups, and ordinary citizens were swift. Many framed the situation as another example of Western institutions exerting pressure on African states, while others argued that accountability and democratic standards should apply universally. Traoré's responses, whether through direct statements or broader policy positions, were interpreted by supporters as a warning against external interference and a call for African leaders to stand united. The significance of this moment lies less in any single diplomatic action and more in what it reveals about shifting power dynamics. The United States has long relied on strategic partnerships in Africa to advance its security and economic interests. However, these relationships are increasingly being reassessed by African governments that seek greater autonomy in decision-making. At the same time, U.S. policymakers face domestic pressure to align foreign partnerships with stated values on democracy and human rights. Uganda finds itself in a particularly delicate position. On one hand, it remains a key security ally with significant leverage due to its role in regional stability efforts. On the other hand, growing scrutiny over internal political developments has complicated its relationship with Western partners. Any perception that the U.S. is targeting members of the ruling family carries substantial political sensitivity within Uganda and risks fueling nationalist backlash. The broader African response to this situation highlights a trend toward collective consciousness regarding sovereignty. Leaders like Traoré have benefited from framing Western criticism as part of a historical pattern of external control. This framing resonates strongly in countries where memories of colonialism and Cold War interventions remain vivid. As a result, actions taken by institutions such as the U.S. Senate are often interpreted through a lens shaped by historical grievances rather than solely by their stated objectives. At the same time, Africa is not monolithic. Reactions to U.S. pressure on Uganda have varied widely among governments and populations. Some African policymakers privately welcome international scrutiny as a means of encouraging reforms, while others fear setting precedents that could later be used against them. This divergence reflects the continent's complex political realities and the balancing act leaders must perform between domestic legitimacy and international engagement. The media environment has played a critical role in amplifying the perceived impact of these events. Headlines emphasizing confrontation, warnings, or dramatic shifts tend to outperform more nuanced analyses, contributing to a heightened sense of crisis. In this context, Traore's image as a defiant leader standing up to Western pressure has been reinforced regardless of the precise content of his statements. For the United States, managing relations with Africa now requires navigating a landscape where traditional diplomatic leverage is less effective. Economic competition from China, Russia, and emerging Middle Eastern powers has given African states more options than ever before. This diversification of partnerships reduces the influence of any single external actor and empowers African leaders to resist pressure more openly. The situation involving Uganda and U.S. Senate scrutiny underscores the limits of unilateral influence. While Washington retains significant economic and diplomatic power, its ability to shape outcomes increasingly depends on collaboration and mutual respect. Heavy-handed approaches risk alienating not only targeted governments but also broader regional audiences. From a geopolitical perspective, the involvement of figures like Traore adds another layer of complexity. Although Burkina Faso and Uganda operate in different regional contexts, the symbolic alignment of leaders who challenge Western narratives creates informal networks of solidarity. These networks are not formal alliances, but they influence public discourse and can shape diplomatic postures. The long-term implications of this shift remain uncertain. If Western institutions continue to emphasize accountability without adapting their messaging to local contexts, resistance narratives may strengthen further. Conversely, if African leaders use sovereignty rhetoric to deflect legitimate concerns about governance, internal pressures could intensify, potentially destabilizing fragile political systems. What is clear is that Africa's geopolitical environment is evolving rapidly. The continent is no longer merely a passive arena for global power competition. It is an active participant shaping its own future. Events involving Uganda, the U.S. Senate, and the responses from leaders like Ibrahim Traoré reflect this transformation. As African populations become more politically aware and globally connected, the space for external influence without domestic consent continues to shrink. Leaders who articulate messages of independence and dignity, even amid significant challenges, can gain outsized influence beyond their borders. This dynamic helps explain why Traoré's voice has carried such weight in discussions far removed from Burkina Faso itself. The current moment may ultimately be remembered as part of a broader realignment rather than a singular confrontation. The recalibration of U.S.-Africa relations is ongoing, shaped by mutual interests, competing values, and historical legacies. Uganda's experience serves as a case study in how quickly strategic partnerships can become points of contention when political expectations diverge. For African leaders, the challenge lies in navigating this new environment without isolating their countries or undermining long-term development goals. For Western policymakers, the challenge is to engage Africa as a partner rather than a subordinate, recognizing the continent's growing agency and influence. In this context, the reactions surrounding U.S. Senate scrutiny and Traoré's stance are less about immediate outcomes and more about signaling. They signal Africa's demand for respect, the limits of external pressure, and the emergence of new voices willing to challenge established power structures. How these signals are interpreted and acted upon will shape the future of Africa's engagement with the world for years to come.
You've been watching Echoes of Africa, where every story carries the sound of tomorrow. If this moved you, subscribe now, like, and share so Africa's voice never fades into silence.